Hi, everyone. My name is Erez, as it was said. I'll start with a disclaimer. I'm not an expert on IP, and what I'll be talking about is my personal experience and the way we do things at Scopio. Some of it may be contrary to what Greg was talking about. Some of it may be a mistake. So be careful about what you use and adjust it also to your specific use case. Uh, Sorry if I cough a little bit. I recently got over COVID. Um, so at Scopio, first I'll take 2 minutes to explain what we do because otherwise you won't understand why we do uh, what we do with IP. And I'll talk about how we do things. At Scopio, we developed a technology that enables you to scan and analyze microscopic samples at the highest resolution in the world. And with this, we're basically the platform for analysis of cell morphology at scale. And I'll talk about our focus for a second because it is important for IP. And I was wondering if I should discuss it or not here, but I think it's important for our strategy. So our platform can scan and analyze theoretically any type of sample. And we decided to focus our energy on hematology. So CBC testing, complete blood count testing, hasn't really changed in about 50 years. And so you go and you get first line testing, CBC, and after that, they go and look at it on a microscope or look at snapshots and snapshots of cells. And the problem is that a lot of the missing information is held in the cells and the morphology of cells, the way they interact with the environment. So the abnormalities, the different ratios, and other different types of problems. But there was no technology to image and analyze them at high resolution. And this is what Scopio came with. So we developed technology for computational photography. So a super resolution, real-time super resolution technology that enables us to scan the entire sample at the highest resolution. And also analyze it using AI. So we're a combination of hardware, software, AI application, all in one. And I think this is important because it brings up a dilemma. So as a company, we could look at ourselves as a company that developed the technology that enables us to scan samples and analyze them. And it's very broad and very general. But the more broad you go, the more difficult it is to get patents approved. So if you go very narrow and you say hematology, then great. It's a narrow field, and if it hasn't been done, then we have a strong case there. However, what if we pivot? What if we grow as a company? What if someone acquires us for the technology and wants to use it for another need? So you're always left with a dilemma, and I'll tell you how we decided to essentially focus on it, which is we go quite broad on the technology, things that are very, very strong patentable technology, and we try to go more narrow on things that relate more to software AI and applications to kind of try to get the best of both worlds if we can. Very briefly, just so you understand the hardware and software, I'm not going to dive into each application in depth, but we have two platforms using the same technology. One is called the X100. It's FDA approved, and it supports 3 slides. It's meant for small and medium hospitals. And the other one is the X100 HD, which stands for high throughput. It's pending FDA approval. It hasn't been approved yet, and it supports 30 slides. It's meant for larger facilities. Now, each of them can run different applications. So the first one, which is FDA NCE cleared, is the full field peripheral blood smear application. And that one is the first application in the world for scanning and analysis of blood, the blood smears. And it essentially, in the sense of the AI and everything, it's a decision support system. So it follows what a person could theoretically do, except it takes out a lot of the guesswork. It makes it significantly more efficient. It uses AI to analyze things. It never gets tired, never fights with its wife. It just creates a better workflow solution. The second application is the full field bone marrow aspirate application, which will be, hopefully, assuming it gets approved, the first ever tool for bone marrow analysis. We recently finished the clinical trial there. It is a step above what the peripheral blood smear application does because we actually use the scanning and the analysis of just vast numbers of cells there. Because diseases in bone marrow can be focal. It's not distributed homogeneously like in peripheral blood. but it hasn't been approved yet. So just I'm clarifying the disclaimer there. And then there's future applications. So there's where we're going, and this comes up when you're a company in your strategy for IP, because you're always conflicted between protecting the near term of what you're doing and trying to go and expand beyond. Again, the broader you go, the more difficult it is to protect. So it's always a question, and it brings up another dilemma, which is how much energy and resources can you devote to this? You're a startup company. In the end, you also want to create a product and you want to sell it, and you have engineers and they need to be working on things other than IP. So there's dilemmas that come up there. So this relates to something I already discussed, so I'll be very brief. But in creating this, there were different steps in the life of the company as well. So in the beginning, we focused most of our energy on just the core technology. Just being able to do this high resolution scanning that was never available was what we did at first. Because if that didn't work, it doesn't matter if we can do AI, right? And we didn't have the data at that point. What came after that is a lot of work that focused on the application in AI. And that's where we started going more in depth into software, into AI, etc. Again, I'm saying AI, I mean machine learning, but everyone understands here. And then there's the future possibilities where we're going, which is taking this technology and basically unleashing our full potential onto the world of medicine, meaning like using what we created as a core technology and approving in the FDA those next steps and future abilities that it brings. And the question is when to protect it, how to protect it, how much to devote now to protect something that I may or may not do in the future. So I'll talk about the components of IP inside Scopio, and of course, some of it is general and some of it is very specific. This, by the way, on the right shows the way we, like the super resolution, the colorful image was actually created from these low resolution images using our super resolution technology. So in strategy, there's first the question of what am I trying to achieve? Then there's the process that I put in place, which is how I want to achieve it. And then there's resources, which is how much am I willing to devote to this. So let's talk about the strategy at Scopio. And again, this is very, very personal to what we do and not necessarily applicable to every different company. So I'll start with a very broad statement that will anger some people, maybe, which is the patent office was created in an age where software and algorithms did not exist at all. And the criteria that is suggested and was described very well by Greg before was created in an age when there was only hardware. Different types of hardware, and many aspects. Hardware isn't just chips. It goes all the way from materials to medicine to everything, but no one thought of software and AI. And I would claim that the criteria isn't actually right for software and AI, because in software and AI, most of the work is actually the labor. A lot of the inventiveness, the innovation come in the labor of creating something that no one created before you, and not necessarily in doing it in a way that no one did before you. And this means that the criteria that was presented, in my opinion, my personal opinion, is not always the right way to judge patent. And it creates a lot of the dilemmas, which is why, as Tamar asked before, I think that if the percentage of software in our lives is growing very, very strongly exponentially, the fact that it grew with like about 10% in the percentage of patents, I think is a testament to the fact that this is actually very miscorrelated. So hardware is the classic strategy. And if you are able to defend it, it is a very strong protection. However, when you go to software and algorithms, I think there's a dilemma. And again, you can sometimes combine, and it's great, as I said, when you go narrow. But I'll talk for a second specifically about software. When I say very valuable, I mean in the direct way. So it's very difficult to show infringement, which makes it often difficult to protect. It's very important to focus on the process and not the implementation, in my opinion. But software and algorithms have two more values for a company that I think are not of the interest of the IP firm, but are very strong interest to the company. One is shareholder value. So when you have IP, venture capital and generally investors tend to look at it as an asset. And I'll be blunt, they don't always know if it actually is going to be an asset. And more blunt, you don't always know if it's going to be an asset. So I think that there's a value there that is important. And sometimes it's worth it for that. But sometimes it actually creates an actual value on top of that, which is your competitors don't know if you're going to get that patent. So after you file it and it was published, there's a period of like 2-3 years, sometimes it can be even longer, where no one knows if you're going to get that patent, but your competitors can read it online. And then they have to start asking themselves difficult questions. What do I do with it? What if he gets it? And I came out on the market with this, and then they can sue me. So suddenly they start thinking, they're going into their heads, trying to figure out what to do about something that you may have filed that may not pass. And that creates value. You have no way of measuring it. You don't know if it's going to happen, but sometimes it creates that value. So there's a process to try and understand if you think that it will be valuable, even if you can't show infringement. If you think that they won't be able to do it without it, they may think they have to solve it another way now, and then it's going to slow down their R&D. So that's actually a value, I think, for a company that we put emphasis on. And when you're talking about AI, I think the same rules apply. But I think you can, from what I've seen in the past, if you go narrow enough in your claims and you put actual details of what you're trying to protect, algorithms can pass as patents. But it is very important. It's going to be more revealing than you may have wanted it to be. So if it's worth it for you, and if you think that the algorithm itself, either you can hide the core or it's strong enough, then it's worth protecting, I think, as an algorithm as well. And we've done it. We've done all 3 types in our company. And I'll talk in a second about the process. Then there's a question of, are you trying to be more offensive or more defensive? Of course, it's always a mix. It's never 100 and 0. But I think the way I see it is the freedom to operate, FTO, is the most important thing. Because you're a startup company, and in the end, you need to create a product, and you need to have people using it. And if you did that, you're going to be successful. So you want freedom to operate so that you can be out there and you may win. As long as no one can stop you, you can win on better product. But after that come other considerations of the IP. So one is how your competitors view it. So are they going to be aggressive with you? Do they view patents as important? Are M&A activities in your field based a lot on IP or not? And some fields are more historically reliant on that, and some aren't. The second is, and this is a very controversial statement, so I'll be careful with it, but it's how you view your exit strategy. And one, you don't know the future, but you do know how you're building your company. If you're building it in your mind more towards an M&A or more towards an IPO. And it does lead to a different balance between the two. And I'll explain why, because I don't think it's trivial. In an M&A, the most important thing is that there's no legal action against you. If there's a risk going up against you, no one's going to buy you. They're going to wait to see if you win or you don't win, the lawsuit. And so you want to be more defensive. You want to be very safe and make sure that your FTO is very strong. But if you're going for an IPO, you're going to grow. You're going to start acquiring others. You're going to be there long term, and other players are going to move into the field. And you have to survive on your own. So you have to be able to play aggressively if and when needed, because you're now the David going to the field of Goliaths, right? So you need to be able to sometimes hurl a rock in their directions. And so you want to build a portfolio that includes also offensive patents in your thinking process. So how do we do it at Scopio? The first thing is we do not treat IP as a one-off event. So it's not the engineer that comes up with, oh, I made up this idea, maybe we can patent it. We have an IP forum with members that have been trained by, we went through a session with IP legal counsels, and we learned about the considerations. And it's the same team that writes all of the different patents, so they understand how the patent office thinks. We get the rejections back and the comments from the examiner and everything. So we learn, and we keep the same team long term. as far as possible. Of course, people move companies sometimes. Luckily, no one from our IP forum left so far. And then we sit in that forum, and first thing is we file provisionals. And we're very liberal with our provisionals, but we're very strict with our rules of our provisional. So the first thing is it has to have some value for us. So it doesn't matter from the USPTO point of view at this point. It's will it benefit us in any of the ways that I described before. Second is we do look at the criteria that the USPTO or other regulatory bodies look at, and we try to understand, will it stand, right? Because in the end, we don't want to waste our energy and time if it's not going to stand. And infringement shows with an asterisk because, as I said before, sometimes certain patents we know that we won't be able to show infringement on, but we still pursue them because they will make other people's lives difficult. But typically, we notice that if we require this of ourselves, we tend to find ways of drafting the claims that help us show infringement. So if you view it as a core essential part of a patent, you find ways, because you start asking yourselves, what would I look for? And it relates to what Greg said about reverse engineering, and we find ways to do it, and it actually changes our patents around by requiring it. And then we wait with the decision as late as possible, because we get to see what everyone else is doing, what's coming out there, what's coming out in academia, and we write our patent to the most up-to-date situation that we have available to us in the competitive landscape, in the world, and in our strategy. Like maybe we'll pivot, right? 6 months in, we decided this isn't important. And it's happened many times in the past that we filed something and then we figured out that it's not the right way to do it. And if a competitor actually, like if we filed it and a competitor tried to do it, they would fail anyway. So why would we protect them, right? We failed and we assumed that we're smarter. So last slide is resources. So be stage appropriate is a really important piece. As a startup company, in the beginning, money is really expensive. You raise the seed round, and patents are expensive. The lifetime cost of a patent can be around $50,000. You know, drafting a good patent is about $10,000. Then you have filing fees and ongoing fees, and again, the numbers vary, of course. But when you're a small startup, like you have to be very careful about what you file. But as you grow, you have the ability to adjust your strategy, to file patents that you wouldn't file before, to devote more energy inside your organization. So when you're 5 engineers at the beginning and someone has to sit and write patents, then 20% of your workforce just went out the window. When you're 100 people in the company, you can choose to have a person that does mostly IP, and it could be totally worth it. So being stage appropriate, I think, is really important. A lot of companies, create an IP strategy in the beginning, and they tend to continue running with it. And because of the IP forum, we find ourselves re-examining what should be our strategy again and again every 6 months or so. And it changes, it evolves all the time. I spoke about dedicated people. And the last thing is IP is not just your strategy. It's, as I said before, about competitors, but you're going to be surprised. So one of the examples in our case, and this will be the last point for this presentation, is that we found out that a potential competitor had a portfolio from an academic portfolio, and they were in a, let's call it an unstable financial state, and they made it available. And we found that we could license it for FTO purposes. We didn't need it for our own, but we realized that if we filed it for FTO purposes, it would strengthen our ability to go broad with different things. And so we used that opportunity, and it cost us, of course, money and energy and time, but it was out of the budget we intended, and yet one of the best decisions I think we've ever made, and to license that portfolio. So I think with IP, you have to constantly keep your eyes open and see, because everyone around you is also changing their IP strategy. And threats and opportunities are going to rise. And I think as a company, the IP forum is my #1 takeaway. have that IP forum. When you have people that are mindful of IP, they will bring the value with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erez.
One question from me. From what we know, patent is published only 18 months after you did the first provisional. And you're talking all the time about knowing what's there and looking at your competition. How do you deal with this 18-month gap, or this is a black hole that everybody has the same?
So there are several ways. First of all, sometimes there's a black hole, but there are many different situations where it actually operates a little bit different. So one is a lot of things come from academia, and they publish. So even though they filed beforehand, they publish what they did, and some company may license it, so you know what's happening and you know who talks to who because people talk. That's one. Second is some of your competitors may be public companies, and for their reasons, for their share value, they may reveal information that they could have kept silent because it serves them. It serves them in other ways, but it also serves us. So basically, by just keeping your ears open, and if you're dealing with a private company that creates its own IP, then yes, usually you'll just find out about it when it is revealed, or when they start talking about a coming product, and you start understanding there's no way they did that without having this, because we're in the same field and we have the same problems. So we start understanding there's clues in there. So it's a little bit of detective work, and sometimes you're just really surprised out of the blue with something.